Good Monday morning, everybody. This is Greg Kiley, your 2020 president of CCIOR and CCI MLS. And I don't know, for week 7, 8, I don't know, Ryan, I've lost count this time. But this week we should have been at, many of us should have been at the NAR mid-year meeting. So I know Ryan's going to have some updates about that in his slides. And we're also staring at that mystical May 18th date right out in front of us. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And we've also got two great guests joining us, one now and one will be joining us in a little bit. So Ryan will do the full introductions once we know that everybody is in the room. I'll just take a quick second to remind everybody that there still are a few opportunities to nominate your fellow realtors for this year's professional recognition award ceremony. And so if you need any information about that, reach out to us at the board. You can call me, you can email me, you can reach out to Ryan. We'd love to see and hear about all those who are worthy of special recognition, especially these days. So any questions, let us know about that. And from here, I will now turn it over to Ryan, if you can.
All right, and Greg, I mean, you hit on a great topic of the awards and making sure that people are nominating folks. I mean, we have this is the second year of our Good Neighbor Award, which is recognizing those who have done great works in the community. We have a lot of realtors out there who really volunteer with a lot of organizations, and we want to highlight them. So please make sure if you have a realtor or you are one yourself doing a lot of great volunteer work in the community, fill out a nomination form and let us know about it. We want to highlight you and talk about you. So I've got a few things to go over real quick before we get into our speakers for the day. And always, we have live continuing education webinars on every Wednesday at 1 p.m. This week is Transactions from Start to Finish with Deb Martin. It's part of one of the core curriculum classes for the Cape Cod Real Estate Specialist designation. So if you're interested in that, please take a show of that. We have every Wednesday at 1 p.m. through the end of June. So far, we have scheduled live CE webinars. This Friday, 10 Ways to Develop Real Estate Strategy in a Strange New World with Jody O'Brien at 10:30 a.m. We have a professional development webinar every Friday at 10:30. So take a view of that one this week. Also, as Greg talked about, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, the NAR mid-year meetings, legislative meetings, where a lot of realtors, over 15,000 realtors from around the country go to DC every year to talk about issues, get professional development, have NAR governance meetings, is going online this year. And so you can sign up and get more info at legislative.realtor is the website. There's a lot of meetings and sessions that are live streamed. And when they are live streamed, you just do have to sign up and register first. Registering is free, but they do want you to register as well. And I'm going to highlight a couple of them. So a couple of my suggested sessions to you guys is Tuesday at 11 a.m. There is NAR 360, which is really a 360 overview of what the National Association of Realtors is doing right now, what they have been doing, where they're going in the next year. It really is pretty comprehensive and really impactful. So I would encourage you guys to take a listen, watch on that. One thing to point out is 11 a.m. is the time it is. All the sessions on the website are in Central Time, so you've got to do a little 1-hour conversion on all that. Then Tuesday at noon, right after that, is a federal legislative and political forum with former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and former White House Chief of Staff and Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. So probably pretty interesting. Neither one have been known to hold their opinions, so it should be pretty insightful and chock full of one-liners, I would think, between both of them. And then general session at Wednesday at 11 a.m. features the Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn from the House of Representatives, and Senator Tim Scott from the U.S. Senate. They're actually both from South Carolina, and a little bit about Tim Scott, just because he's a dear friend of mine personally. He owned a real estate company before he went into Congress. He was a realtor champion even from down when he was on county council to then when he became a state house member. I worked closely with him both those areas before he became a congressman and then a senator. And he's one of those true realtor champions that you've seen all along the way as they've gone from local government to state government to Congress. But he owned a real estate company and a insurance company before he got into Congress. So he is really insightful. So I hope you check that out with Tim Scott there.
And Ryan, he's on a lot of people's short list for future presidency. I know
he's one of the most inspiring people I've talked to. I was talking to him once about it, and he said, "Oh, why would I want to run for president?" He literally has a goal to inspire 100 million people before he dies. Wow. That's his goal in life. So he definitely has a compelling life story and a compelling story he talks about. So then also some more suggested sessions. Wednesday at 1 p.m. is the Real Property Valuation Forum. So you hear from some of the top appraisal folks in the country about what's going on with appraisals, how that's going. Some guys from Fannie and Freddie, I believe, will be there as well. And then on Thursday at noon is Business Strategies That Meet the Moment with Brian Buffini. Also on Thursday, so it's 11 noon and 1 o'clock sessions each day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Thursday is all about professional development. So we have Dealing with Turbulent Times session at 11 a.m., this Brian Buffini session at noon, and then Lee Brown, who is prominent national speaker, at 1 with a session. So those are definitely the days to hit it on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I will bring in now to talk a little about what's going on in the world of our housing assistance world on the Cape in these turbulent times as well. Alisa Galazzi, who's the CEO of the Housing Assistance Corporation. Alisa, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
I think most people are familiar with Housing Assistance Corporation, but for those that aren't, can you talk about what you guys do here on the Cape?
Oh, absolutely. So Housing Assistance Corporation is kind of a one-stop shopping for all things housing is the way we define ourselves. So we have multiple contracts that come out from the Department of Housing and Community Development. That means that we help the low income and extremely low income as well as up into the middle class with rental subsidy, shelters, weatherization, and a rental assistance program. Again, we're actually giving grants and funding to help stabilize people's housing situations. We're finishing construction on an 8-unit construction project in Hyannis, and we, an agency masses the resources from multiple different sources and then either distributes funds or the resources out to the community at large, all of Cape Cod and the 2 islands. Are we frozen? We lost Ryan.
It's okay, you're still there.
Want me to keep talking?
Keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
Still
Okay. Yeah, all right. So one of the things that I was grateful to be able to come on and talk about how we readapted our agency in the past couple of weeks to respond to what's happening in the marketplace. So typically our contracts and our agreements with our clients require face-to-face interaction, right? Much like the realtors, much like you all. So on March 15th, we saw really quickly that we were going to have to quarantine or be able to limit our access face-to-face with our clients. So in about 3 days, we took 120 people and turned them into a virtual company. And so it was a huge undertaking. But because of that, we're able to still work with our 1,200 Section 8 clients and get rental subsidy out, do income adjustments. Because of our ability to adapt quickly, I have about 5 staff members who work with people who are literally homeless and still living in encampments, and we're able to work with them through cell phone and through social distancing. And we have 4 family shelters. We were able to set up cleaning protocol and social distancing protocol right away, so that we've had 3 staff members that have been tested positive, but they've all been able to quarantine, and no residents or no other staff members have gotten the virus because of this kind of strict contained isolation that we have staff members on premise, but they're not on the floor interacting with the community in the same way. And as we were going through this, we knew that really quickly, if businesses were going to shut down, right, we're going to see a bigger gap in housing affordability. And we all probably could predict that if rent was hard to pay before, right, and people were stretched before this crisis, they're definitely going to be impacted afterwards. So one of the things that we did really quickly is we leveraged our RAFT infrastructure. So RAFT is a program that's rental assistance for families in transition, and it's money that comes down from the Department of Housing and Community Development through HUD and state dollars. And it is we're the agency that's the administrator for the region, and it comes into our agency. We have several staff members that are trained very specifically what to look for in the application, to income qualify, determine vulnerability. We were able to leverage that infrastructure and try to amass other funds that we could use for people who were above the income for RAFT. And so we've been able to expand our rental assistance program to this workforce housing relief fund that really is focused on folks who are displaced because of the COVID virus and right, you know, no longer working or able to make as much money as they did, and get them rental payments so that they can use the money that is coming in for other things, food and healthcare costs, etc.
Yeah, and with the housing bill that passed, it's really important that even if you have a landlord, or you are a landlord, or you know landlords, right, to get their tenants, to get their tenants in touch with you guys, because that money is only geared toward paying rent, right? So it helps that landlord out by getting that tenant in touch. It really is helping on both sides.
It absolutely. So we like to see it as, yeah, it's a 2-pronged win, right? Because we don't want landlords to go into foreclosure or to not have a good experience being a year-round landlord. And so we have resources that can help stabilize the situation for the landlord. But on the other side of it, right, we don't want people in our community to be displaced, to experience housing instability or insecurity with the threat of homelessness. So that would be bad for our economy and our workforce and our overall society. So it is a win-win to be able to stabilize the situation. And we have to work very closely with the landlords. So as you can imagine, right, when someone calls, we don't just take their word that their income has been cut. We have to do an assessment on that. We don't just take their word of who the landlord is on the who owns the property. We have to go in and check the records and work with the landlord to get the payment directly to the landlord. So it does require involvement of the landlord and the tenant to get us the information we need to get the money out the door. In order for us to be good stewards of the taxpayer money, right? We've got to make sure we're assessing the situation correctly, analyzing it, and making the right distribution.
Yeah, and it seems like you're doing a really, it's been really successful raising money for this workforce housing fund, right?
It has been. So the good thing is I have this infrastructure because we already do RAFT. So we already have, like I said, a team who does the intake, collects the applications, does the income assessment, does the vulnerability screening, does an interview, coordinates back out with the landlord. So I've got the infrastructure, and we can use donations as a direct pass-through. So there's no administrative overhead applied to donations that come in. And we've, the Home Builders Association has been really generous in helping to promote this fund and get get people on board to donate to it. So it's a combination of donations from individuals and corporations, as well as some towns have stepped up, and we're working on some agreements with them to be able to distribute town funds through the Affordable Housing Trust. And we're looking at CPC dollars and CDBG dollars. So there's a couple other things coming into play that will have some different restrictions. They're each got a little tiny, little different nuance of what rules you have to abide by. But the most flexibility for us comes from donor dollars. And that's where we can even help with mortgages with donors. We can even, help with other things beyond rental assistance. So yeah, I think the news is, people should call us because we're amassing these resources and then can distribute them out or connect people to other resources that we know about.
So what's been the, what has been the effect, right? We see it on the news, the number of jobs lost and all that, but what has been the effect on the Cape as far as calls to you guys? Are you getting more and more daily? How dire is it out there right now for some of these people to pay rent and mortgages?
Yeah, it's a wonky thing in the beginning. I can tell you that our calls are up 400%, specifically for rental assistance and for foreclosure prevention. That's what people are calling for. And people are terrified. And there's a little bit of, in the beginning, in the beginning of March, it was the last 2 weeks of March, people didn't know what to expect or what was happening. They couldn't get on unemployment. Even the first couple weeks into April, people were still having trouble getting onto the website and getting their unemployment set up. And I'm sure you've heard this criticism of people, they're making more money than they've ever made on unemployment because of the federal dollars that are coming in. That's really only up to about $70,000 a year. After that, people aren't making more money than they've ever made. And actually, it's not for every category of worker. So there are a lot of people working in the restaurants where their income tips weren't part of their income. So that they've taken a severe hit on even what they're getting from unemployment. So there's some nuances there that we're teasing out to be able to really understand the financial situation of the people that are calling and that need help. But the calls, yes, they keep going up. People are getting more and more desperate, especially as the July deadline, when the federal subsidy goes away, comes into play. So again, I believe there's going to be a second wave on the Cape. I don't know about the coronavirus, but there's going to be a second wave of how it impacts our housing and how it impacts our economy, because people are able to kind of kick the can down the road a little bit with the eviction moratorium and with the additional money coming in from the federal unemployment. So there's going to come a point where those two things are going to go away and rent's going to come due. We don't know if the jobs are going to be there. We don't know what that's going to look like, but all of a sudden everyone's income is going to go down again. They wouldn't have made their summer income. So there's going to be a precarious situation coming up that we're trying to, again, prepare for by amassing these funds and by talking to towns so that preventatively when it happens, or if it happens, right, we're in a position to be able to respond.
Yeah, and the other thing is you had launched about maybe over a year ago now, the Rent 365, yeah. Talking and educating people about how they could take a short-term rental and convert it to a year-round rental and perhaps make more money in the process and things like that. How's that going? And is money still available, especially in these turbulent times of not knowing what this summer is going to look like here? I'm sure there's still need of year-round housing for folks.
For sure.
And so what's going on with that, and how can people find out, get more information?
Sure. So, well, just one clarification. It wasn't just about converting seasonal to year-round, seasonal rental to year-round, because seasonal rentals are a good part of our economy, and are an important piece of our history and who the Cape is. But there were a lot of underutilized property. There's a lot of property that's owned that was inherited by family members or multiple people owned that they just weren't even using, and they weren't even renting it. So we felt like there was an opportunity to kind of untap that underutilized resource. So right now we are getting calls from people of how to rent year round. We're hearing from landlords that they don't know if they're going to open, that if we can do short-term rentals. I'm not sure they want people in their house if they want to do the short-term rental at all that way. So, but it is still an investment, right? They still have to either pay the mortgage or, they need the income for their own lifestyle. So I do think that there is a really good opportunity to add some year-round inventory, whether it's conversion from a short-term to a long-term, or just even buying and renting year-round. That right now it depends on the income or the cost of the house, right, and how much you put down. But the carrying cost can still be covered by rent, year-round rent. So there is a good play there for someone that's an investor. So we right now are not offering the $1,000 stipend because we've been getting so many calls that we don't feel like we need to convert, we don't need to incentivize people. But we are hosting some landlord education classes with an attorney, Michael Pierce. And it will be focused on first the eviction moratorium, and then we'll start focusing on what are the best practices for leasing up again. We did that with you guys a while ago. We're going to do it again on Zoom.
We'll carry them online with you as well and promote them out to everyone as well. Because heard good feedback from a lot of our members who are landlords, or just something to promote to their clients that are something for them to tap into.
Yeah, we want the landlords to be successful, right? It's a partnership, it's a legal agreement, it's got to work for both sides. So helping a homeowner convert to becoming a landlord, or a landlord becoming a better business person and landlord helps us all. So trying to figure out, right now we are trying to figure out like what's that sweet spot that we need of how many more year-round rentals. So we're doing some analysis on that, and hopefully can be publishing that in the next couple months. So we have kind of a target to be talking about, comparing our marketplace to other communities and the year-round mix of housing there. So that's coming. But I have to say, I moved here after 9/11. So my eldest daughter was born in May of 2001, and obviously 9/11 was in 2001. And we moved here in end of October, beginning of November, because we were looking for this safer environment, quality of life. And so I feel like, we just read it in the Cape Cod Times, but we've been to you, Ryan, you've been talking about this for a long time, that now is a time to come back to the Cape. I think what's your quote? Where you want to quarantine is probably where you want to live year round, right? That's exactly right. Like we are a great year-round community. So I think there's going to be another layer of year-round housing converting over, with people either coming here or already owning and moving here.
Yeah, and you and I have been really at the forefront of trying to move some of these land use regulations to allow for more year-round housing, because quite frankly, we just don't have enough. But yeah, absolutely. How you use this to convert to more year-rounds, as you talked about, you moving from Los Angeles after 9/11 for the same type of security, the same type of feeling that people will want now. We had the Vice President of Behavioral Insights from NAR on a couple weeks ago talking about the same type of thing. And then also the other interesting thing is half the deaths in Massachusetts have been in assisted living facilities. And so I think there's going to be another look at, is assisted living facilities the right thing for your parents or something like that? And if not, then multi-generational housing and some of that stuff you're going to probably see pop back up a little bit. I can't imagine how hard it's been for you guys in that atmosphere to having to, in homeless shelters, try to keep the virus out of it.
Yeah, trying to control people that are already challenged to control, that don't assimilate norms is hard enough in just regular work. But I mean, people have been responding. Our clients have been responding for the most part. And it takes diligence and creativity and kindness, you know.
Things that I don't think about at the beginning. I saw at the beginning of this, you were asking for like board games and car and things like that for kids, because you can think about the kids in the homeless shelters that are no longer going to school and now they're in the shelter all day long, right?
Well, yes, and worse than that, you know, it's not a palatial estate that they're living in. The family is in a bedroom, and sometimes the bedrooms aren't very big. So the family has to quarantine in their bedroom. They're allowed to come out right to the social areas, but then you've got to have social distancing. We have scheduled times in the kitchen. So it's constrained, and it's hard. It's a hard environment for them to be in for so long. So yeah, we were looking for you know, toys and games and, you know, new things that we could help families out with that would be fresh. And you know.
And someone's asking that they have a tenant that's behind on rent. What is the number for him to call to start getting help?
771-5400. 771-5400, or our website, haconcapecod.org. And Liz Belcher is our main person that would then, you know, shuffle the call and coordinate it out.
And then the other question is, where can we drop off toys for, I guess, the kids in the shelters or anything else the kids may need that are in the homeless shelters?
So normally,
how can they do it?
Yeah, 460 West Main, but please, we don't want anything used. I hate to be sound like that, but right now we can't take things in that are used, so they do have to be packaged.
Can they drop it off, or would you prefer them to mail it to you?
Either way. Yep, either way.
Okay.
We have a drop box there. We have we've set up, so when we get ready to reopen, we have set up a walk-up window, like an ice cream window. So a window that slides open, so our clients will be able to stay outside and we'll be on the inside with a barrier between us. So pretty soon here, within the next 2 weeks, we'll be back to some face-to-face interaction once we work through the protocol of touch tape and, you know, handling that kind of situation. But again, we're adapting to this idea of, okay, how do we stay safe? How to still respond to the people? But long story there, we have a box outside, a lock box that people can drop things off. And we have people coming into the office every day to pick up mail and pick up. So.
All right, great. All right. Anything else you wanted to get the message out on that you have not already?
I guess the really me about this crisis, though, is that it's really another opportunity to remember the importance of housing and how having it be affordable is so important in a person's life. When our government officials and our healthcare providers are telling us that the best intervention for this virus is to go home and quarantine, we quickly realize what a privilege it is to have a house that we can afford and sustain, and what a privilege it is to even just be able to wash our hands. And so making sure that we have that for everybody in our society to the best of our ability really helps us all. We're all connected. And affordable, safe housing is a key indicator for healthcare outcomes, a key indicator for our economy. And right now, I guess the silver lining is that we're all feeling it and seeing it. And so I hope that we can keep this thread going and keep working on zoning and keep working on building out our year-round inventory so that we can have a safe place for all of us to quarantine or to live and work in, no matter what comes in the future.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. I'm looking at some of the questions, making sure we have them. How many have you converted in Rent 365 to year-round housing so far? 25. 25, okay.
Yep.
And that's more than probably a lot of people said you would do at the start of it.
I laugh because People either said
Because
I was crazy.
told you weren't going to convert 25 of them.
You told me, people thought I was crazy. Like, there's no way, no one will ever do that. I'm like, situation and circumstance for everybody is different. You can't say no. Offer the opportunity and see what happens. So
one of the million times I'm wrong in a given day.
Yeah, well, it's good that you know that. We had over 100 calls, and many people converted and just didn't even want the money we were offering, but they took the lease, they took the consult with our attorney, and they're still working on it. They just felt like they didn't need that extra bump, but I feel like there's more work to be done there. We still have people calling, trying to figure out how to do it and what to do and how to become a landlord, and there's an opportunity for somebody. Or for people to add this specialized inventory and really add value in our community.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question about how people can help you with that effort, I think it's talking to people that have underutilized properties maybe that they know about that are looking to keep them long term, and how they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have another conversation, Ryan, of figuring out how, I know there was, when we were first starting this, there weren't a lot of realtors doing year-round rentals. We were out trying to talk to people and learn as much as we could. But maybe there are more realtors now that want to turn into that conduit for people. And we'd be happy to refer and work with other people that are doing that work. To make sure that we're, doing it the right way. And, we're not trying to take the business, we're just trying to get the resource out there. And so there's an opportunity to partner or to work together in some way on that, for sure.
Right.
Our landlord education, I'd like to build out. So any topics that people think that landlords or that potential homeowners flipping to be a landlord would want, that would be great too.
All right, great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And what was the number and website everyone can find you on?
771-5400, 508-771-5400. That's our phone number. And our website is haconcapecod.org.
All right, great. And now our next guest, I'm moving over to State Senator Julian Cyr is joining us to talk a little about what he's been working on and what's going to go on in the future a little bit. Thank you, Julian, for Senator Cyr for taking the time to call in today.
Hey, Ryan, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to join. And it's always great to be following Alisa Galazzi, who does marvelous work, at HAC, really looking at housing and housing issues before this crisis were, in my estimation, kind of one of the biggest challenges we faced across the region, both from a capital A affordable housing perspective, but more broadly, right? How do middle income people make a life here on the Cape? Supply has been a big challenge of that. Ryan, you've been, and your board has been a great partner in trying to figure out these issues and really push for more housing production. All of that said, that issue and a number of others, basically every other has been put a little bit of a pause button on, given that we've been working on COVID-19.
And you have
really,
you come from an interesting perspective because it's a public health crisis and an economic crisis at this point.
Yeah.
And you come from, a lot of people may not realize or remember that you worked for Department of Public Health prior to becoming a state senator. So you kind of have a little different perspective, probably a lot of people that you still talk to that are there. From the public health crisis, where do you think we are in Massachusetts at this point?
Yeah, so for folks who don't know, I spent 6 years at the Department of Public Health prior to joining the Senate. And a lot of my work before that was in public health work, risk communication. So actually a lot of what we're doing right now is actually talking about risk communication. What is the information that the public needs to know, or an individual sector or industry or workforce needs to know to keep them safe? So broadly, from a health data perspective, Massachusetts has seen a significant, we have had a significant COVID-19 outbreak. We, by most measures, if you look at both number of positive COVID cases, but really the most, because we don't have universal testing, the sort of most statistically significant number is deaths, right? We have the third highest deaths in the country from COVID-19. Those are surpassing 5,000, I believe, happened over the weekend. So we have a very significant, statistically significant pandemic that's manifested here in Massachusetts. As it relates to Cape Cod and Barnstable County, if you look at the death per capita rate, I believe we're in the top 20 in the country for deaths per capita. So although our overall numbers are about 1,000 cases across the Cape and Islands, the rate of mortality, when you look at morbidity mortality, seems higher here than it is elsewhere in the country. I think that's largely due to demographics. Barnstable County is the third oldest county in the country. That being said, we've had now a number of days, 4 or 5 days, of sort of sustained decreases in numbers, so numbers of confirmed positive tests, both in morbidity and then mortality, number of deaths. So that is all a positive indicator. And the real challenge here is sort of figuring out, how do you go forward? What's sort of the timeline of that? And you want to have as much information as possible. The governor's current orders go through, May 18th, and I think that we're all sort of eager to look at that.
I think that's where a lot of people are confused.
Yeah.
What do they expect on May 18th to have happened? And then if you can talk a little about all the steps going on between now and May 18th happening, because I think that's where a lot of people are like, so on May 18th, do we start gradually reopening? Is he going to extend it? Like, what's going on? What do you know at this point?
Yeah. So this is I should also say, to preface this, my experience in public health, but before all that, I grew up in my family's restaurant in Truro, which was a seasonal business we had for 28 years. So I look at all this stuff through the lens of risk communication and public health, but also, thinking about, what my family would be doing, wondering, do we open the restaurant? What does this mean for our season? So the current orders that are in place, Governor Baker has an executive order that is in effect until May 18th. Under that order, all leisure accommodations, which encompasses hotels, motels, short-term rentals, Airbnb, everything, is prohibited until May 18th. The order is silent about what happens after May 18th, which, from my perspective, I think anytime there's uncertainty almost, I think, is one of the biggest challenges you've got, particularly in a business, from a business lens. So there is a lot of uncertainty on what's going to happen post May 18th. And the honest answer is we don't know. My expectation, though, of this is, and Ryan, I'll give some framework for some of the things that we're doing, both at the state level and at the regional level. My expectation, though, May 18th is not going to be some sort of magic day where the curtain is lifted and things are going to be able to be opened up. I expect on May 18th, there may be some modest reopening of certain activities, likely in an outdoor space. So actually the determination that was made around golf courses is probably consistent with what we may see in other sectors that'll open up first. So at the state level, the governor has an advisory board of 17 members that are advising him on reopening. That report is due on May 18th. So if you just, the report is due on May 18th. So I don't expect we're going to see big changes on May 18th. And also, if you look at the public health data, it's showing I'm optimistic about the public health data, but it's insufficient to sort of say on May 18th everything's going to open up. So the advisory board to the governor on reopening, that report's due on May 18th. We have 2 members from the region who are on that board: Linda Markham, who's the president of Cape Air, and then Wendy Hudson, who's a small business owner on Nantucket. So 2 of the 17 have Cape roots. We have worked very hard to make sure that there's seamless communication with Linda and Wendy between the Cape and Islands legislative delegation and then this broader group that's been established. So 2 weeks ago, there were several disparate efforts. The Cape Cod Chamber was pulling together a reopening task force. Barnstable County was pulling together something. The legislative delegation, really led by Rep. Peak and by me, working with Wendy Northcross of the Cape Cod Chamber and working with the county and municipalities, basically pulled all those efforts together into one Cape Cod reopening task force. Ryan actually serves on that task force, as do a number of other representatives from municipalities, both from town managers and select board members. The Cape Cod National Seashores on that panel. Mike Law from Cape Cod Healthcare, a number of other stakeholders. The chamber has also worked to have subgroups, right? So if we put every entity that has questions and concerns and sectors around reopening, we'd probably have a group that was 150 people, which would be unmanageable. So these subgroups have been working. And the aim of the Cape Cod reopening task force is really twofold, right? To make sure that we're saving lives and saving livelihoods. And so what the goal is that we are taking our lead from the governor and his reopening advisory board. Likely the rules of the road are going to be made statewide, and I'll talk in a moment why I think that's really important, particularly for this industry. But our real goal is to make sure that when those rules are established, that we're able to disseminate that information to particularly all of our municipalities. From an implementation perspective, we have 15 towns on Cape Cod. There's 23 when you incorporate all the islands. 23 different municipalities of their own authority can be tricky. And we want to make sure that implementation is happening in a uniform fashion, that business owners have a place to look, that workers know where they can find information about how reopening should happen. But the other side of the task force, and I'd argue is really the most important, is that through this task force, we hope that the region can communicate with one uniform message about reopening, whether that's initially first to seasonal returning who've already returned to the region or returning to the region around steps that they can keep themselves safe, and ultimately then to visitors when that's possible. Speaking, from both from a public health lens and from a economic activity lens, having a uniform information that people can rely on to basically do risk assessment and to lower their risk and their family's risk of exposure is absolutely essential to preventing further community spread of COVID-19 and also allowing reopening to happen in a fashion in a way with some predictability. So that's really the aim and the goal of the regional effort. Statewide guidance, rules of the road information, and then more regionally working to make sure that we're speaking with one voice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one voice and why the statewide guidance is so important. I mean, in some of the task force calls, I didn't even think about it first, right? Like the importance of, statewide guidance and all the towns playing by the same rule on beaches, on recreational areas, on even short-term rentals, like on everything, even restaurants, right? Because if you close up one area more than everywhere else, it's going to have this balloon effect. And like tourism dollars, economy dollars, whether it's year-round residents or tourism dollars, do not know town boundaries.
No, and our visitors
then we go to what's open, and it still has the same impact.
Well, and even from a public health perspective, certainly our visitors and many of our residents, to be quite frank, don't really follow the more parochial town boundaries that those of us who are in government maybe or on the regulatory side of things or in Ryan's work really know. And so just from a public health messaging perspective, I was really worried about, for instance, the mask orders that we were seeing. It was understandable why towns were taking action around having different rules for masks and face covering. But until the governor sort of issued this statewide, I couldn't keep track of, okay, in my own district, all right, in Provincetown, I've got to wear a face mask between Johnson Street and like Pleasant Street, and in Yarmouth, I have to wear a face mask in a grocery store. I mean, like that inconsistent information or varying rules of the road actually make it more challenging for people to adhere to public health guidelines. So first and foremost, that's really crucial. Second is that if the rules are really kind of are variable and different, that the level of both enforcement and then the questions around that from both an employer and employee perspective become very, very challenging. A cautionary tale I'll tell is around what we work to do on both islands around construction. Actually, both islands were very concerned about the construction workforce, which a good chunk of that are folks who live off island, who come on a daily basis, or who are individuals who The workforce comes from an immigrant community that lives on island, who are living actually, to be frank, in 3 or 4 bedroom houses with 20 people. These are environments that are prime for the spread of COVID-19. So the towns worked in actually a very collaborative fashion, worked with me and Representative Fernandez to have an order essentially to allow the towns under their public health orders to go further, which made good sense at the time. The challenge about it was really hard to keep the towns, wanting to continue the construction ban in a uniform fashion. So at one point there was movement afoot, especially on Martha's Vineyard, that Edgartown was going to go this way, and Oak Bluffs was going to lift the ban here, but West Tisbury was going to keep the ban in place. And from a communication perspective and from a business predictability perspective, it is not good public health, and I'd argue it's not good business for us to be having sort of varying kind of protocols and rules. We worked really hard, my office and Representative Fernandez and leadership from the hospital and a few other folks on the island to basically get the island to work to lift that ban and to put new protocols in place in a uniform fashion. But that whole experience for me has made me feel very strongly that we need uniform rules of the road that are set at the state level. Frankly, the towns just do not have the expertise. They don't have the staff capacity. Their local boards of health are already, health agents do wonderful essential work, but they're already overwhelmed. And frankly, to be frank, they can't, it is uneven in their ability to sustain the political pressure of the hard decisions that have to be made to keep people safe. And so this is why I think what the governor is doing is right. And I'm really hoping through the work of our regional task force that we're able to elevate the concerns and issues that we have and make sure that they're heard. That being said, there's a whole lot of uncertainty, particularly for the real estate industry and short-term rentals in particular. There's more that we don't know that we know, and I know that's incredibly frustrating and that uncertain. There's a whole host of questions there. My hope is that my overall hope is that whatever the rules of the road are, that we have clarity, that there's a roadmap, that there's a timeline, there's information that people can plan on. Just another extension from May 18th to May 30th or whatever it sort of could be, that's going to be really frustrating. It's not going to be good for public health, and it's going to be very challenging, particularly in the short-term rental space.
Yeah, and on the short-term rental space, that's the really challenging part. And so just to update everyone in our membership, I've spent the better part of the last 3 days at the end of last week after talking to a lot of members of the governor's task force, then saying, okay, well, they actually want industries to propose how they could reopen themselves, and also, but do it within alignment of them. Limit capacity, staggering capacity, the cleaning procedures, things like that. And so I've spent the better part of the last couple days trying to help figure that out, working with a lot of our vacation rental brokers, guys that are doing this, thinking about this, what they're seeing, and then also with our town health agents. I got a call this afternoon with some town health agents to say, what are you looking for? What are you looking for out of these guidelines? Because they don't want a whole bunch of guidelines either, because they're dealing with the COVID crisis themselves. They don't want to have to go and deal with a whole bunch of new regulations right away either. So how we position that, I've put up some drafts together. I've been circulating with some of our members for feedback. So we're definitely looking by the end of this week, by the May 18th deadline, but really by the end of this week, to have submitted to the governor's task force our recommendations on how we could potentially do this and still stagger capacity. There's going to obviously be an impact on the summer, but how can you do it and also protect public health at the same time?
Yeah, I think we've got to be honest. We will have a muted summer season, and honestly, if we are able to achieve that muted summer season, I'm going to consider that a win, given just sort of where we sort of are. But I think that that collaborative effort, right, that Ryan's talking about, is truly essential. And it's not only just saying, all right, here's what the industry wants, but really talking to local health and other regulators to even say how you'd realize this, right? At one point, I've heard, there's been a number of kind of creative ideas that have been out there, which is all good, but an example in sort of another sector has been around food and food service. And here in the Outer Cape in Provincetown, it was proposed, hey, we should use food trucks. This could be a way to do that. Not realizing that, the local health agents, there's like a health agent, and there's a part-time health agent. They barely have enough time to do the baseline minimum standards for sanitation that need to happen in existing kitchens, let alone food trucks, right? So we've got to interrogate some of these creative ideas around reopening, and then make sure that we're touching base, particularly with local health, to see what's workable and what's not workable. I think the other factor that's going on here, Ryan, is that, there's been a lot of people are really aware of kind of like what time of year that we're in, and people are very concerned about an influx in population, the influx in population that we've seen, the influx of population that we'll see. I think actually, and there was a lot of concern around this sort of in mid-March, and there was this, even there was a petition to close the bridges and all this sort of activity sort of around late March. And there was real concern, right, about people who were going to basically come to a second home or another residence to sort of ride this out. What the health data shows actually is that by and large, the people who came here did so in a really safe manner. We didn't see widespread community spread because of an influx in population. We know a population influx happened then. But I think that sort of wave one of influx is a good model for what wave two, wave three, what subsequent population influxes is going to need to look like. And so that's why we've worked to, one put out initial guidance to seasonal residents to make sure that people know what the existing rules of the road are. We're going to work to sort of update that as information becomes available. But I do think on the short-term rental space, that sort of anxiety and concern in the community about population influx, which is warranted, although there's some elements that are a little more out there. But I think it's really important that we're grounding everything that we're doing in really solid risk communication and public health messaging, and that we actually look at the data. And I increasingly think that there's good evidence that says, all right, the population influxes that we've seen so far, and I can tell you, like, there's more people here than there usually is. There's definitely more people than there are usually here in March, and there's more people than are typically here in May. Broadly, we've done a good job on that, right? So how do we sort of continue these successes as we see additional population influx? But really, my sense is that the short-term rental space is where some folks have sort of put their attention to. I actually, though, could see several scenarios when you look at leisure accommodations. So one is going to be a continuation of sort of the ban on all leisure accommodations. This is just a guess, so it's just an educated guess, but my hunch is that'll likely be continued after May 18th for some period of weeks. Is just my sense, because we haven't seen any of these rules sort of put out there or developed or suggested. And so, had I had my druthers, I think it would have been fair to just say, all right, this is to May 30th, right? And the report's due May 18th. Going forward, some proposals I've heard about, all right, well, maybe we'll allow hotels or motels or sort of single, with certain egress requirements to open because they're already regulated by the towns. I've actually heard another proposal, which is quite interesting, that we're really concerned about. If people are here, they need to have a place where they're able to basically have a kitchen, right? Some sort of kitchen unit where they can be able to sort of cook and not sort of overwhelm all of our food service establishments. That's another kind of idea that's been out there. I think there's all these kind of interesting ideas and different scenarios of what could happen. But my sense is what y'all are doing is exactly the right approach around saying, okay, how do we reopen safely when we can? How do we envision all this? How do we work collaboratively with local health, with the rest of the region, to make sure whatever we're doing, there's a uniform message and it's uniform information.
Yeah, so we've had a couple questions come in.
Sure.
Somebody's asked for clarification. So we won't know how the state will move after May 18th until May 18th.
Yes.
And from our understanding, yes, that's the answer. The governor may roll out a couple things like he did golf courses last week, and a couple of what I'd call low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Over time, but I don't think we'll have the full report from the governor's reopening task force not due till the 18th.
And I also even think from an implementation perspective, Ryan, okay, so say we're going to allow short-term rentals with certain protocols in place. There has to be cleaning. Maybe there has to be staggering of stays by a day. All people who clean have to have PPE, personal protective equipment. If that went into effect May 18th, most of the brokers or entities that are managing short-term rentals, let alone the people who just sort of do one-offs, right? Like my parents do Airbnb or did Airbnb. They're not doing it now. In this moment, they couldn't even meet the standards. So I'm really mindful of whatever we do in reopening. You got to give people time to prepare to be able to actually do it, and that there has to be some sort of, and that we don't want to also put standards in place that are not able to be realized, especially at the municipal level. You could envision a regime that says, all right, all short-term rentals are allowed, but provided they have to be receive some sort of an inspection or seal from the town. Well, it's going to be November by the time our current health agents could do that work.
Which is we're figuring all that out, and we put a lot, and I put a lot of draft around that, so I don't want to get into some of the details on that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get into some more of the questions as well.
Sure.
From one is, do you think there's a chance the countywide approach versus there'll be a countywide approach, or at least the Cape and Islands approach versus the statewide, since we are more seasonal in nature and everything else? Or how do you see that battle playing out between the two?
So I am doing everything I can to make sure that we do not have discord between the state, and it's really less the county, but the region. The entities that have the authority here to sort of go further are the local board of health. Local board of health authority is very broad. There's some dispute over and from a legal perspective, who trumps what, right? The governor's order versus the local board of health. But I really think it's really dangerous for us to get in those situations. One, from a messaging perspective, people need very simple, uniform information around risk communication and around steps they need to take to keep themselves safe. Also, it wastes a tremendous amount of time and staff resources, and particularly municipal resources. It creates a whole host of uncertainty questions. It's not good for public health and keeping people safe, and it's not good for economic activity. So our goal has been to make sure that that the governor's advisory board hears the needs of seasonal communities loud and clear. I actually think we've done a pretty good job there, not only in having two representatives from the region on the panel, but we're really working to speak with one regional voice. That's breaking through, and I know that because a bunch of my colleagues are calling me, saying, "Hey, this Cape Task Force is great. We want to do this. You guys seem like you're effective." So that's what I would say there. I really caution municipalities on going it alone. And the question that I asked them, and actually it's Rep. Peak's question, but I've stole it, is what expertise do you have at the municipal level from a public health and safety perspective that the governor does not have access to? And whatever that information is, if you have that, we need to make sure that we're elevating that to a statewide level. And I think having a uniform approach is essential. So what we're doing as the Cape Cod Task Force is not creating our own sort of playbook. What we're doing is looking to take our cue from the governor and then really focus on the implementation of that, both, yes, from a local health perspective and a municipal perspective, also just resources, right? We're gonna have guidelines around beaches. Someone needs to pull together a poster or a sign that can be posted at the beaches. That's what we're doing. And then working to speak with one regional voice. So I think it's a big mistake for anyone, even us as a region, to try to go it alone, because I think that I just think that's a mistake, and we're not doing that.
And then, so outside of reopening, too, I think the question is, and especially from a lot of our members who have landlords or are landlords themselves, on the COVID housing bill that you guys passed, the state of emergency is also different from the stay-at-home order, isn't it? I mean, and we don't know when the state of emergency may end, because the housing bill, I want to clarify something that someone said in a question. Housing bill does not recuse anyone from paying rent. I just want to clarify that. It's not saying don't pay rent, or it tells people they don't have to pay rent. They still have to pay rent. It just basically until 120 days after the state of emergency, or 120 days from the passage of legislation, or until 45 days after the state of emergency, it basically says you can't give a notice to quit. And so, 120 days from when y'all passed it in mid-April. So I'm trying to do math in my head. I think that's like mid-August maybe, or so when that would go away. The governor can't extend that. But I just wanted to clarify that did not allow people not to pay rent.
It does not. And what it's really about is just making sure that people are not receiving a notice to quit in the middle of a pandemic. There's also provisions in the law that allows people to mortgage forbearance, particularly for landlords who are in that situation. I would, my expectation though for like the duration of the emergency is essentially so long as we're responding to a pandemic in Massachusetts. So I expect all of these things are things we're going to live with until, to be quite frank, there's a vaccine or there's broad community immunity. Even the place that has had the largest epidemic in the country is New York. There was a sort of public health surveillance done. 1 out of 5 New Yorkers has COVID antibodies, which shows the extent of the outbreak. It also means that 4 out of 5 New Yorkers don't. So I would say that most all places are quite a far ways away from having community immunity. And so, we're likely talking about until there is on all of these things that we're talking about, until truly there's a vaccine, which is a very sobering thought on any and all topics.
Yeah, and then we had a question about the guidelines out for people that own short-term rentals.
Yep.
To answer that question, we have a lot of stuff on our website, on our COVID page for vacation rentals in a pandemic, entire page devoted to that. And then the other thing is what we're talking about is we're kind of assimilating those right now. Us as an association, with the public health agents, with input from people like you and others, kind of gathering all this and trying to put that together to give to the governor's task force as a way for perhaps a path to move forward. But for what we have guidance out for right now is on our website. For those that have not seen that, please do.
Yeah, and if folks are looking for information about the reopening task force, the guidance that went out regionally to seasonal visitors or seasonal residents, which is only in effect through May 18th, and it's going to need to be updated. But all of that is on, if you go to senatorcyr.com/reopening, all that information is there too. The real hard part is making sure that people have the information they need. And that gets a lot harder when, again, municipalities sort of try to go it alone or do sort of one-offs. I'm hearing a lot about sort of an idea that's been pitched in Wellfleet. And my sort of advice there is like, look, we need to take our cue from the governor. If we feel that ultimately the governor's orders, are not sufficient or don't go far enough, and that's sort of another conversation. But really, it's important that we're speaking we're providing uniform information, that it's the best absolute way we can protect public health. And it's also, I think, in my estimation, our best hope of having economic activity and having a semblance of a summer.
Yeah, we sent a letter to Wellfleet over the weekend, encouraging the same thing. Hold your horses. Let's just wait. Yeah, statewide guidance on this. So one question's come in about the issue of, some of the big box stores are still open, but all the mom and pop shops aren't. How are we going to balance that in the future? Because it's really the small. I think a lot of the small retail, a lot of the small mom and pop shops, they're the ones that are the lifeblood that are going to be in trouble going forward.
And that's a great question. And I think it's something that's been raised in the task force. I'm sorry, both on the governor's advisory board. Wendy Hudson, who's the representative from Nantucket, she owns a bookstore and another small retail shop, and she's also affiliated with the Cisco Brewery. But she's been saying, hey, look, this is ridiculous. I'm I'm the only one who's allowed to like work in my store. You know, this is just not really fair. I expect some of the first things that are allowed are going to be, you know, curbside pickup at small retailers, or, you know, using the same framework the governor has used around occupancy in grocery stores. So grocery store occupancy is only allowed to be 40% of what the total occupancy of the store is. I could see something similar being implemented first in small retail establishments, ultimately, you know, in food service establishments like restaurants. If I have a critique, and broadly, I think that the governor has been proceeding in a public health led approach, and it's been, I think broadly this has been good, but I do tend to find things are a little more corporate, right? You know, I get the golf issue that some people feel really strongly about because they like to golf. There's also a whole host of other outdoor recreational activities that sort of fall into the same bucket. And so I worry a little bit about that there's a little bit of a skewing of a sort of corporate perspective that often does not take into account our economy here, which, you know, largely is, you know, a big business on Cape Cod is if you own like 2 restaurants, right? So, you know, we, that's been a concern of mine, and we're really trying to advocate truly for, you know, particularly small businesses, which do not have, you know, the advantages that some larger, particularly, you know, national entities have. And frankly, you know, I want to make sure those small businesses are succeeding, that are supporting our community. You know, J. Crew filed for bankruptcy. Okay, whatever. I mean, you know, I know people work there, but, you know, our focus needs to be on local, you know, businesses, which are the lifeblood of our economy. So a little critique, just a soft critique from me.
Has the state started thinking about perhaps programs to help those small businesses beyond the SBA funding? Because as we know, the problems accessing, some small business had accessing the SBA funding. Has there been any discussion up at Beacon Hill about that?
So there's been a lot of discussion, and
No
there's a number of like good ideas about what this could be. The problem is money, right? So we're probably going to have about an $800 million revenue shortfall in this fiscal year, so FY20, which runs through June 30th. And then the next fiscal year that starts July 1st, we estimate that we're going to have a $5 billion revenue gap. So $5 billion in a $43 billion budget is a big chunk of money. The state budget's $43 billion. It's not something that you can, it's hard to do trimming, right? That basically means 10% cuts across the board. It limits your ability to do, you know, some of these pieces that we're talking about from a business perspective, or for other aid and assistance. A $5 billion shortfall, for context, in the Great Recession, so basically the tail end of 2008, like 2009, 2010, the shortfalls were about half of that figure. So we're looking at something that's basically twice as big from a revenue loss perspective as it was a decade ago. Then again, you know, if we see some federal action here, this could be a whole different conversation. I would really argue, right, this is the time, you know, we shouldn't be holding back. We should actually be funneling resources, resources everywhere we can, particularly given that this recession is not, you know, this is not caused by some sort of problem or failure in our economy. We've literally put our economy on life support so we can get through a pandemic. So there's lots of really good ideas. The problem is money. And of course, we cannot deficit spend in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and nor can any state. And I would argue those who've been saying, oh, just go bankrupt. I mean, actually, the Commonwealth is in a very strong position. We've got an over $3 billion rainy day fund. We've got a lot of resources and assets we can rely on. And we also have a pretty diverse tax mix, right? So our revenue mix is not, you know, we're not just reliant on 1 or 2 sources, but it's a very difficult environment. And so that's why federal action is so critical. If we don't get federal help, then it's going to mean that we're not going to, you know, pick the topic, and we're not going to be able to do it, including support for small business.
And we got a question about hotels and B&Bs being able in the small enclosed spaces seem dangerous at this point. I think that's some of the stuff that the task force is the statewide task force trying to figure out how that kind of stuff could open and could operate. I know the Mass Lodging Associations had input on and how they could potentially do it with some no contact systems and things like that. So it's been interesting conversations when you start hearing how creative people can get with changing their business operations.
Yeah. I do worry a little bit that, if you're a larger player, you're able to sort of either invest in or sort of adhere to these larger rules. So, my interest, even in the short-term rental space, is that whatever we've got to do has got to be fair, or just in the lodging accommodation space more broadly, whatever we do has to be fair. And I think that, I'm aware of that most of the accommodations that we have on Cape Cod and on the islands are either, a family-owned small motel or hotel that's running on tight margins, or rentals that are being, largely executed by individual families with some assistance from some rental firms. So I'm mindful of that. I get a little concerned when, big corporate hoteliers are saying it's possible. I always want to interrogate that and make sure that, all right, what is this going to really mean for my constituents?
Also, one last question before we go, because I know you've got to run for another meeting. One question came in about, this crisis obviously is putting more of a strain on housing affordability, and this is something you had already been on, making sure that when we come out, we're talking about the development of affordable housing and housing affordability in the future.
Yeah, so Ryan, you probably have a much better idea of what real estate's going to look like, and a lot of it's sort of guessing, right? But I think that we may see more supply, right? I think there's some people who, there's been a lot of properties have been sort of bought that are predicated on the ability to sort of, you rent out 6 weeks and you come down for 2. Not sure if that's going to be possible. Not sure if people are going to also want to come. There's that piece. So I think we may see more supply in our market, which will help a little bit. There's also a lot of conversation. I think people are realizing that, we basically jumped a decade in our workforce, right? All of us basically had to start working from home, and a lot of people really like it. I personally don't. I know my sister loves working from home, and I think would be very happy to continue working from home for the duration of her employment with CCIOR. But, I think more people are realizing actually that, hey, wait, we could have this great quality of life on Cape Cod and work remotely. We've got some infrastructure needs we got to deal with, particularly on connectivity and speed. But I think that's going to play a role in our market too. I really worry though that, I think of my friends who work in hospitality here on the Outer Cape, my peers, right? The 30 somethings and 40 somethings and 20-year-olds who kind of, right, make particularly Provincetown function and run. And I really worry about whether or not they're going to be able to sort of ride this out. A lot of them are make a lot of money, make their income from tips. And, I just worry that, a muted season, once we get whatever the season's going to be, once we get to Labor Day, aside from a few weekends, you don't really have a good chance to make a living again for another 9 months. And so I really think that, particularly from a younger perspective, and by younger on Cape Cod, I always mean, the younger cutoff is anywhere between 50 and 55 on Cape Cod. But I really worry about populations not being, this cohort not being able to really make it. And I don't think we're clearly not going to be able to sort of build fast enough to help those folks. But it's critical that we continue on this potential, if anything good comes out of this, maybe there'll be some more supply in the market. It'll provide some opportunity. I think what HAC's talking about is really interesting. But I think a lot of it, we just don't know. But the housing issue is going to remain, paramount, certainly for me. And I think for most people who have a good understanding of what the needs of the region are, it's housing, and then it's the more existential challenge around, the climate emergency.
All right. Well,
So
thank you.
more
so
to
much
come
for-
there. I definitely want
Yeah.
ideas. on
I
that.
mean, maybe after May 18th, you can come back sometime and we can
Yeah.
talk a little more about what that means in the path forward. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for
You bet.
being part.
I just know, I know how uncertain this is and how frustrating this is. And I know that people are having really tough conversations with, people have signed leases, right? And are wondering, do I get to come? Do I not get to come? Can I be reimbursed? Like, what is this going to be? I know how hard it is. I really hope that whatever the state comes out with, that there's predictability, that there's some sort of uniform standards, that gives the ability for people to plan. I think that's most important, whatever this is going to be. And I'm hoping we just don't, on May 18th or shortly thereafter, I hope it's not just sort of a blanket continuation with no additional information, but at least giving people something, because I think there's a lot of questions that are out there. And the uncertainty, I think, is one of the most challenging components, both from a public health perspective and from an economic activity perspective. So thank you for having me, and everyone stay safe and try to go out and enjoy the sunshine. We're apparently getting like hail or something tonight. So anyway, enjoy it, and thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you guys very much. Greg, any last remaining words?
No, I mean, I'd just say thank you to our two guests. It's so great to have the relationship with both of their larger responsibilities in which we can call on them to share information with us. All I'll say is just we had a lot of information in the beginning about activities this week. Check in on that, check in on the awards, and we were remiss in the beginning not to have wished all the mothers a happy Mother's Day one day late, but I know there are many out there who had a great chance to celebrate this weekend, so hopefully you all had a great weekend. We'll be on the NAR meetings all week, and we've got a CCIAR board meeting. And then just a reminder, a lot of great questions. Ryan and I are on an MAR meeting talking about government affairs and other stuff every Monday afternoon. So if you've got great questions and you want MAR to try to address them, send them to us now, and we can talk about them with MAR's leadership and legislative affairs team at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
And today's was packed full because we're trying to get guests as we can with availabilities, and so sometimes it stacks up. We worked on throughout the week to try to find the most relevant information for the next week, which is why a lot of times we don't release who's the guest until Friday or Saturday, even, because it's just we're trying to make sure as things happen sometimes quickly in some weeks compared to others that we're getting there. So.
And Ryan, the good news is next Monday is May 18th, so we won't have anything to talk about whatsoever, will we?
Not on that day, maybe on the 19th. So yeah.
Yeah, stand by, everybody. Look, I wish we knew, but we're trying to find out as quickly as everyone else is. So just stick with us while you can and help us ask good questions on your behalf.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a good one.